Hello, and welcome to Apostolic Teens Podcast. I'm your host, Hudson Livingston. Thanks for joining us.
And welcome to another episode of Apostolic Teens Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Hudson Livingston. Thank you for joining us. First of all, by now you probably know that I like to wear ties. And today we have on a blue suit, got a nice blue tie. The main color is light navy, baby blue dots in it, and so it's cool looking. But most importantly, I got this from Ace Ties. If you want to have great style like me, DM us and we'll get you connected. That's Ace Ties. And they are the sponsor of today's episode. Anyways, let's dive right in. I want to talk about a subject we often maybe deal with if you go to public school or like a private school that is not the same religion as we are, like a Catholic school, anything like that. I want to give an illustration to begin with. When a man's friend, so you got Jim, and his friend Bob decides to try drugs one day. He gets on it and he gets addicted. And Jim's just over here on the sidelines. Well, Bob has been Jim's best friend for his whole life. Jim doesn't want to just cut him off like that. Most likely, if Jim decides to keep hanging with him, we'll see a common occurrence. So, Bob is addicted to drugs, but Jim still wants to hang out with Bob. Well, Jim's hanging out with Bob one day, and Bob pulls out the drugs, and he starts doing them. Well, I know this is a silly illustration because of Jim and Bob, but Bob's about to do drugs, and Bob's like, man, I hope you don't mind. I just gotta have some right now. And Jim's mind, what's he gonna do? And say, nah, I'm not gonna tolerate that. Well, this is what he ends up saying. He says, yes, I don't mind. You can do that. I'm just not gonna do it. So for a while, Jim hangs out with Bob. Time and time again, Bob does his drugs, and Jim's just watching. Jim is tolerating Bob doing the drugs. Sooner or later, Bob will ask Jim, does he want to hit or does he want to whatever? And Jim will have to say yes or no. But eventually, if Jim keeps on hanging out and tolerating Bob doing the drugs, he will end up on the drugs himself. Because he did not walk away. He just continually, maybe he said no. Maybe they asked again, and eventually, whenever he hears and sees the effects that happens to these people when they get on these drugs, maybe he's like, what if I do try it and it wipes all those bad memories I have? That could be going through his mind. And because he tolerated Bob the first time and just continued to hang out with him, he has grown tolerant. So then he eventually tries the drug in our illustration. And he gets addicted. He feels the high, like everybody says. Eventually, over time, with those same doses of drugs, he doesn't feel the same feelings that he did in Jim's body, the one who used to not be on drugs. His body is now becoming tolerant to the drugs, and that is a popular term when it comes to your body growing tolerant to something. Jim has taken a certain dose of drugs every time. Well, it's starting not to work as effectively. That is his body becoming tolerant to the drug. Because of this, he will have to have larger doses in order to have the same effects. And whenever he takes those larger doses, it is destroying his body even more. Because it doesn't feel the same with those small doses are still hurting your body. Your body's just becoming tolerant to the blows that it's giving it. I want to stem off of this illustration. Kids don't do drugs. We have friends, okay? I've been friends with a few people my whole life. And I'm still friends with a few of them today. If they walk away from God, well, they've walked away, but, I see them doing bad things over there. But you know what? They can watch a little bit of whatever they want to. They can get on Netflix. I'm just gonna, go hang out. You know what? They can drink a little bit. I know that's not right, but they can drink a little bit. I'll still hang out as long as I don't get too wild. eventually, if you tolerate that, it'll get to a point where you end up doing it. Do not tolerate the sin in your life before you commit that sin. So, an example, Solomon, he married like 700 wives. That's what he had. And yes, these wives were strategic marriages between people from different countries, but that is no excuse. They had been told, the children of Israel had been told, do not marry strange women, which in this context it means not like weird, but as in from a different country and worship different gods and had different cultures. So don't marry foreign women who don't have your culture, Solomon. Don't marry them that they worship false gods. Solomon knows this, but he still does it. And he marries woman after woman from strange countries. And I can see Solomon, being like, y'all, you can worship your own God. Just don't try to force it on me. Here, I'll build you a temple over there. You just let me worship my God. I'll let you worship your God. So he's tolerating all this in his home. Must have had a huge home because he had 700 wives. When you have 700 wives, you have 700 voices nagging you. He's, going about his business. Solomon, you built a temple for Susie or Washamana. Why can't I have a temple? What God do you serve? I serve Baal. Uh, I made this temple for a different God for Susie, so I guess I'll make you one. Well, eventually, he has temples dedicated to other gods. So, I can see him going on through life a little bit. But then those wives start saying, why don't you just come on to church? Well, why don't you just come on to sacrifice with me? Come on to this other church with me. Try it out. No, I ain't going to do that. Well, after 700 times, then you're going to eventually do it if you just keep tolerating it. Solomon pays the consequence of marrying 700 foreign, other cultures, other god women. He pays the price, and whenever he worships those gods, God punishes him by saying, you know what, you're not serving me anymore. He stopped serving God and eventually just went right on over there because he was tolerant to their gods to the point where he stepped into it himself. So if we stay tolerant to, maybe our friends are watching Netflix and they know better. Let's not be specific. TV. As apostolics, we know TV is wrong. And so maybe they're watching TV. Well, you can watch TV, but when I come over, I'm just going to stay in your room, or I'm just going to do something else while you watch TV. Well, eventually you'll catch yourself looking at it. Say your friend is watching bad videos. You know your friend is, and you've even seen them doing it, but then, you say, well, they've been my friend my whole life. I don't really want to give up on this friendship. Well, you don't have to give on the friendship, but you decide, you know what, just for the sake of the friendship, I'm just going to let them do that. And when I come over to their house, I'm just going to, not watch it. If they know that and they keep on doing it in front of you, you will eventually be tempted. And that's when you've let it gone too far. Because you've tolerated them. You're probably eventually going to step into that yourself. The best thing to do is to be like Joseph. Joseph didn't tolerate Potiphar's wife. Potiphar's wife said, why don't you come lie with me? No, I'm not going to do that. Okay? Well, she comes and asks again. And this time, she grabs his cloak and he runs away. He no longer tolerates it. He got out of it. But still, because he even tolerated it one time, and she has something that is, belongs to him, and she has proof against him, and then we see what happens to him because he just didn't simply walk away the first time. So that's why it's important not to tolerate, because you'll eventually find yourself either in a prison like Joseph, or you'll find yourself in punishment from God like Solomon. Because you see, we sort of paused on Solomon. Solomon's punishment was that his sons would lose their throne and would constantly be in war. And so eventually Solomon doesn't see this take place. But after him is Rehoboam. Rehoboam was I want to say, the last king to rule over the united Israel and Judah kingdom. And right after that, he was the last united king. So after that, you got Israel and Judah split, which would be Solomon's worst nightmare because he was very strategic and, he even expanded the kingdom more than anyone from not even war, from trades and such. So, Solomon doesn't see this punishment, but he knows it's coming for his children. So, the best thing to do for that punishment not to happen is just simply don't tolerate. I bet if Solomon could go back, he would say, knowing that he had all the wisdom that he needed. He was the wisest man on earth, but still, knowing that he was not allowed, that was off limits to him, and he still did it. That is what got him in that situation, to where he was tolerating the sin of other people in his presence and tolerating sin in his own home and in his own life, to the point where he then committed that sin. He had all that wisdom, but still did all that. That's why it's important to be like Joseph again. Run away. Don't be embarrassed if you have to do this. If somebody is talking bad in your friend group, if somebody is saying something bad, don't be ashamed to walk away. Like, just exit the conversation. Like, leave the chat. Just walk away, because I'm a teenager, so I know it looks retarded to just, like, just walk out of a conversation. You know how it is. That's why I'm teaching it like this. But to walk away from a conversation without saying anything, and just with the face of, like, because I've had to do it. I've had to walk away from a conversation because I didn't want to tolerate it, because I would eventually start talking like that. I've had to walk away from a conversation, and they're like, "Where are you going, Hudson?" And I look back, and they're like, "Why are you looking like that?" I got this sad look. And I know that's like embarrassing feeling, but don't let it embarrass you. Because what's more important? You get to look cool, quotation marks. You get to look cool for 5 seconds. Because maybe you laughed at their joke or something. But then God sees that, and that affects your eternity. So is it better for you to be cool for 5 seconds, and maybe, I know this is drastic, but maybe miss out on eternity? Is it better to, for 5 minutes, please the lust of the flesh on your iPhone and lose out on eternity? Or is it better to run away like Joseph and still be able to be used by God? And he's then used by God because of the choice he made not to lie with Potiphar's wife, not to fall into that temptation, not to tolerate her in his ear. And he ran away, and because of that, he was used by God to save his family from famine. So what are you going to do? Please the lust of the flesh for 5 minutes, lose out on eternity in heaven? Or are you going to put away your iPhone when that temptation comes and go do something else and still be right with God? So the choice is yours. Are you going to tolerate the sin, or are you going to say no? That's the big thing. Like, whenever they teach you in school, say no to drugs. I can't remember if it was a rat or something, but that was this tobacco one. You say no to tobacco. And so, like, the rat would say, I would remember coloring in the coloring pages for the rat saying no to tobacco. But you got to be like that to sin. You got to say no to sin. I'm not tolerating it. I'm not tolerating it on my Instagram feed. I'm not when my friends start doing that sin, you're still my friend and all, but I'm not going to tolerate that. I'm going to walk away. We can be friends at more of a distance. I mean, whatever it takes. I'm not going to tolerate the sin that could cause me to lose out on what God has for me. So, I know that was a shorter episode, but, it needs to be talked about. It's another really important episode. It needs to be talked about. Just because it looks cool, and you want to be cool, or just because you don't want to walk away from a conversation and look stupid if you don't laugh at it, just because you have those feelings, you still need to walk away if that ever pops up. Don't tolerate it. So anyways, just wanted to hop on and talk about that for a little bit, and we appreciate all our listeners. Remember, if you want to be linked to someone who can sell you an ace tie at a very reasonable price, you can DM us or DM us on Instagram. Uh, Wherever, if you have my number, you can do that as well, and I can get you with Gabe or Luke, and they can hook you up with the tie. And today's episode was actually presented by Ace Ties, so we thank them. We thank all our listeners, and we'll see you next time on Apostolic Teens Podcast.
Thanks for joining us today on Apostolic Teens Podcast. We hope you've enjoyed this episode. And I think that's it. So we'll see you next time here on Apostolic Teens Podcast.